When the first Europeans settled in America, one of their first attempts to educate American Indians was essentially a Christian missionary outreach, with schools to teach English language and grammar and the concepts of Christianity. By the late 1600s, the Moravians had established schools as far inland as the Ohio Valley, and Catholic explorers had set up mission schools in the north and throughout the Southwest. It was only after a century of Indian wars and westward expansion that the American government took charge of Indian education. By the late 1800s, American Indians had been confined to either reservations or they had been settled in the Indian Territory, or what we now call Oklahoma. At the center of their educational philosophy was the eradication of Indian cultural identity. Children were given Christian names and were not permitted to speak their native language or practice their cultural ceremonies. The discipline was very harsh. Today, we see this as nothing but racial bigotry. But for the most part, the educators were not necessarily motivated by hatred. They were just totally ignorant of their students' backgrounds. American society was steeped in a social class system that had only recently abolished slavery. Educators honestly believed that Indian people would abandon their tribal identities if they were given the opportunity to better themselves. They believed that if American Indians were shown a better way to live, they would want to live like the modern Americans. They would want to assimilate. In 1883, the U.S. Indian Commission began construction on a boarding school for Indian children, located about a mile and a half southeast of Lawrence, Kansas. It was named the Haskell Institute in honor of the late Dudley Haskell, a congressional delegate from Lawrence who was instrumental in getting the school located there. The school was built on land donated by the citizens of Lawrence.
When Dudley Chase Haskell, I think, came back and said, we can locate an Indian school here, was to, quote, gift the land to the federal government. And so local people had to raise over $10,000 to acquire the farmland of O.E. Leonard to make that, if you will, sweeten the deal for the federal government to make this a site for an Indian off-reservation government boarding school.
When the first students arrived in September of 1884, there were 3 completed buildings. Funding ran out before a central heating system could be completed. The first winter was very cold. 22 boys and girls arrived that September. They came from the Ponca tribe, along with a couple of students from Chilocco Indian School in Oklahoma, and 8 Ottawas. They were later joined by approximately 100 Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Pawnees from the Indian Territory. Within 6 months, there were 280 students.
The first 10 years, which was a very turbulent time, and one where you had a lot of different styles of leadership, and where there was a lot of difficulty in trying to get the school up and running and decide, I think, exactly what its mission was going to be. I think this was, to a large extent, an unknown.
From the very beginning, the facilities were inadequate to handle the number of students. That first winter, with no heat in the crowded dormitories, serious health issues arose with cases of TB and pneumonia. During that first harsh winter, 10 students died.
But of course, that first winter comes early. It's very hard on the students, some of whose families join them, I think, to make certain of what exactly was going to happen to them here. And a number of deaths result when steam isn't passed through the pipes early enough. And of course, the close proximity fuels that epidemic.
The Haskell Cemetery still stands as a reminder of the heavy price that was paid by Indian families and staff members and their families during the first 30 years.
At this time, medical practitioners did not have the means to cure many of the diseases. Tuberculosis was very contagious. Still, crowded conditions were tolerated in order to keep enrollments high.
One of the first new campus structures to be built was a 2-story hospital that could handle up to 30 patients. The early Haskell superintendents took radically different approaches to their responsibilities. Where the first superintendent, Dr. James Marvin, was a former minister, he took a humanist approach in dealing with students and teaching Christian virtues and values. His successor, after 1 year, was Russian-born Colonel Arthur Grabowski, who had been educated in military schools in Russia and had immigrated to the United States specifically to fight in the Civil War. His approach was to operate Haskell as a military school. He divided the students into companies of cadet battalions in an attempt to break up tribal groupings. A writer from the Chicago Times described his visit to the school in 1886 with a somewhat glowing report. The dormitories are spacious and comfortable. By the aid of the pupils, the grounds are being leveled and sodded and turned into lawns and parterres, which will all add to the aesthetic character of the surroundings. He also praised the military regimen and quoted Superintendent Grabowski as saying that young Indian boys seemed to be fascinated by his war stories. His discipline was harsh, to the point that he even built a jail building, which served as a warning and a deterrent for students who might want to run away.
For discipline, for dealing with the recalcitrant students, by isolating them in a jail, and those are his own words, by not looking to spare the rod and spoil the child.
It seems to me that there were periods of time in which Indian kids were being treated just like white kids in schools, and neither one of them was a good thing. The physical punishment was very, very heavy, especially in frontier schools.
I know some of the students didn't stay because, they felt like it was too strict, but it didn't really bother me that much. And of course, I think by the time I was there, it wasn't as strict as it was maybe 5 years before that, because they had a jail, and if you ran away, they stuck you in that jail. And they had a place they called, was kind of like a dungeon, it was a kind of a closed-in place where they put some of the students when they were, real unruly, I guess. But
the community of Lawrence thought Grabowski's discipline was too rigid, and in 1887, when there was a drop in enrollment, he was replaced by former Kansas Governor Charles Robinson. Haskell Institute provided a primary and grammar school curriculum, and with an additional land purchase began to teach farming and building trades.
In 5 to 10 years, they're teaching Native Americans here at Haskell to play John Philip Sousa music, and they send them out to Hays, Kansas, in their uniforms, playing John Philip Sousa music. And I compare it to what would happen today if aliens landed in the middle of Central Park.
Haskell administrators never missed an opportunity to show off what they believed demonstrated their ability to teach American Indians higher civilized pursuits. The Haskell Band was quite advanced, and it achieved national recognition with invitations from coast to coast. One highlight was their invitation to play at Chicago's Century of Progress Exposition in 1933. In 1899, Charles Meserve became superintendent for 3 years, and then he was followed by Harvey Peers. Peers had been working at Haskell since 1892 and provided a real sense of continuity by serving the school until he retired in the late 1920s. The school's curriculum expanded, as did the campus itself.
So Meserve begins to put into place, and it really comes to fruition after he has gone, includes the inauguration of a commercial department, business type of courses that go beyond the rudimentary academics, the 3 R's that are the main thrust of at least one half of the curriculum, with the other half being manual labor training, and also the introduction of the normal department to train teachers for Indian schools.
And I came to Haskell about in 24, I think, 23. And they brought us down here, and they left us down here for a year. We never did go home. That I wish I could have stayed there longer. They were strict when we were just like a military school when I was here. We had to get up in the mornings and put our uniforms on and march. I was a mischievous child in school, and when we got in line, I was always teasing somebody in line. They were strict, you know. Well, I got caught, so they made me corporal of my squad. They thought that would straighten me up, you know. And finally they made me sergeant and lieutenant. I got to be captain, and they studied, but they wanted to promote me to adjutant. They said, no, let's don't do that first. And we started out, because on account of her behavior, we've come this far, but let's leave it alone.
And we hated to dress parade on Sunday. And our captain was so in love with her boyfriend. When we come back from the dining room, we had to all stay together, kind of march, march to the dining room, march back. Every time she got to a certain step going in, she'd turn around and she'd have to wave, and we'd stand behind her and we'd wave. We were an ornery bunch. We were dress parading this one Sunday, and we said, okay, whenever she says to the rear march, don't to the rear march, just keep going. So she was up there really, showing off, and to the rear march. The last squad just ran into the other bunch. Anyway, the next Sunday for dress parade, she let us sit out. We didn't have to dress parade. What she should have done was made us do it by ourselves. But we got what we were, looking for.
So it very much is a military regime. While Grabowski is really the one to implement it here, it does last, and it seems to be the model not just at Haskell and Carlisle, but at other schools as well.
Federal funding of the school was never adequate to pay for the day-to-day operations. This necessitated the students being a labor force for farming, cooking, cleaning, and even construction on campus. The farm produced not only the food the students needed, but also was sold locally to bring in money for other materials.
It's the biggest, the best. It was the model that everybody looked at in terms of discipline, number one, because you had to treat the kids with harsh discipline. Secondly, the school was self-supporting. The school worked the students so hard that it supported everything.
The curriculum expanded, as did the campus itself. A state-of-the-art gymnasium was built that became the envy of University of Kansas basketball coaches James Naismith and Fogg Allen. By 1917, the primary grades were eliminated. Since many of the students in the commercial, industrial, and engineering programs were in their late teens and early 20s, the athletic programs at Haskell flourished and actually competed on the collegiate level. The 1920s and 30s produced several All-Americans. John Levi, an Arapaho from Bridgeport, Oklahoma, was named first-team All-American in 1923. Jim Thorpe said that Levi was the greatest athlete he had ever seen.
He was a big man, about 6 foot, about 6'6". He was really a powerful man. He had enough in him to be one of the greatest, and he was at his time.
This 1925 Haskell football schedule demonstrates the caliber of teams they played and the distances they traveled.
Haskell played Notre Dame, Haskell played the Quantico Marines in Yankee Stadium. All you have to do is look at the size of the stadium to see that, given the 1920s, that it was set up for a pretty high-powered athletic program.
The national success of the Haskell football team brought a real sense of pride to American Indians around the country, and it was their enthusiasm that ignited a drive to raise money to build a football stadium for Haskell. And it was American Indians that provided all the funding to complete the stadium that accommodates 10,000 fans. Its completion in 1926 was celebrated with a great homecoming celebration. The four-day event drew many alumni and Indian delegations and dignitaries from across the country.
It was really something to see the people come in. That thing was covered with tents. It just looked like it was something to see how the Indian people came there to celebrate.
One of the members of the Blackfeet delegation from Montana was Two Guns Whitecalf, whose claim to fame was that he was the model used for the nickel coin. A 117-year-old Potawatomi was also in attendance, as was the chief of the Quapaw tribe in Oklahoma. Lawrence residents were treated to a downtown parade unlike anything they'd ever witnessed before. The football game against Bucknell University drew a crowd of 12,000 spectators. And they were not disappointed. Haskell beat Bucknell 36-0.
I made a team, and so come the time for them to go on their first Easter trip. I don't know where they were going, Cincinnati or somewhere. We were going to play out there. Been so many 2 years, I kind of forgot the teams we played back there. But every weekend we'd go catch a train and go and play somewhere down Florida, and we played just all over. And Bill Dietz was a coach there. Then he left there and went to the Washington Redskins. And so before he left there, he was head coach at Haskell.
Another All-American football player was Lewis Rabbit Weller. He was a Caddo from northern Oklahoma, and he played from 1928 to 1930. In his career, he scored 13 touchdown runs of over 60 yards. And in Haskell's win over an undefeated Oklahoma A&M, Weller returned a kickoff for a 90-yard touchdown, and then later returned a punt for a 95-yard score to beat Oklahoma A&M 13-12. He later played professionally for the Boston Redskins and the Tulsa Oilers. After graduation from Haskell, John Levi played baseball for the New York Yankees and later came back as Haskell's head football coach. Another great athlete was Buster Charles, who competed in the Olympics in the decathlon. Academically, during the 1900s, Haskell's commercial and industrial programs were producing students with exceptional job skills, and many went to be skilled professionals in their field. Many went home to be leaders in their tribal communities. The assimilation policy never really produced the intended consequences. Students had resisted the attempts to erase their Indian identity. In fact, the exposure to so many different tribal groups actually strengthened their ties to their own families and culture.
Come 3 years to high school here and then 2 years to that business course. Yes, I liked it because we didn't have all them conveniences at home.
We had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and you know, there were so many different tribes represented.
We had 300 represented tribes that time. Then I went to school just part of the year, 30. I went to school in Kansas City. I lived with a couple, worked for my room and board. They used to do that, place students out to go to school.
I graduated in 28. I also wish I could have stayed there another 4 years.
Oh, really?
I might have learned something. I mean, I liked it for, in the wintertime we slept out on the porches. They had those screened in porches. They were supposed to be screened in, and they had tarpaulins or something on the windows. But you'd wake up in the morning, there'd be snow on your bed.
The military regimen at Haskell continued from the early days, and by the beginning of World War I, 420 students enlisted for military service. On April 18th of 1921, an all-Indian company of the Kansas National Guard was established at Haskell. Known as Company D, it was a machine gun unit comprised of 61 students. In May of 1924, a U.S. cavalry unit, Troop C, was established on campus with 77 students representing 29 tribes.
Well, during my stay at Haskell, I joined the National Guard. We had an infantry company and a cavalry battery, or troop. And we'd go to summer camp, and that's where we got, we'd get a little money off our drills every once a month, and not much. About $12, $15, I think it was, for the month, but that was good money back then.
Troop C, later Troop I, became the show troop of the Kansas National Guard and participated in special events across the country.
They formed the Honor Guard for New York World's Fair, and there were 26 of us selected to go up there, so I got to go there. We stayed there about 3 months. It was quite interesting. We escorted notables that came in, and we were all mounted. We had, they shipped in thoroughbred horses for us, gave us some really flashy uniforms. Babe Ruth Day they had in Boy Scouts, and they invited him to come, and so we escorted him, but he wanted to ride a horse, and so the largest horse we had belonged to Lloyd Yellowhorse, a Pawnee, and he had a big horse. It was about 16, 17 hands high. So our captain said, he went to Lloyd and said, Mr. Ruth wants to use your horse, and then he asked me to go along with him, in case the horse bolted or something. And sure enough, he did. I got to ride along with Babe Ruth, and he weighed 260 pounds at that time.
The 1930s ushered in significant changes for Haskell. The military discipline system was abandoned. For the first time, Indian culture was encouraged, and an Indian club was established. The instructional program became a high school curriculum, plus some of the 2-year post-high school professional and vocational programs were continued.
I went to Haskell then my
senior year in high school, and that was my first experience of being away from home. But I enjoyed Haskell. I attempted the first year about close to 1,000 students at that time. That was in the fall of 1932, and graduated in high school in 33. It was just fortunate for me that my grades were good enough that I could get into commercial, and I went ahead and went to commercial. I attempted sports up there, played some football, some basketball.
The farming and agriculture program was moved to Chilocco Indian School in Oklahoma.
I loved it from the minute I hit high school until I left, and always have, always will. It has been mine and Martha's life. We had what we called a half-day schooling and a half-day details. We just worked, kept up the dormitories, kept up the grounds, just had crews that did the cooking and ran the, as I say, it's just big happy family, but everybody had a detail of some kind. A detail I left out all the time. I was at high school. Right after I got there, they decided to open up kind of a student center, and it was just a young sport recreation area they called the Shack. And having my mother and I tried to run a little restaurant when I was in my last years of high school, so I said, well, I know about running these places. So that was my detail. It provided me with a little money even.
But Haskell was a godsend for us and my sisters and brothers. Really enjoyed it, got a good education. And
food was good. Of course, they had some rather stringent regulations. We had to stay on campus unless we got permission to go to the show or go to town or something or other. But there was a lot of freedom. And it was just one big happy family, everybody.
So it was just like being at home. And I really enjoyed it. Almost from the moment I got there. I didn't get homesick at all. Chilocco I was terribly homesick. And while I was there, I was kind of a joiner, and I was active in the Methodist Church group and in journalism. I played in the band and played in the orchestra. And they had a drill team, and I was in that.
With the beginning of World War II, many students and Haskell graduates entered the armed services. Frances Archambault, who had served as an officer in her Haskell battalion and as an officer in her 1928 graduating class, learned to fly airplanes in order to serve as a pilot with the Women's Army Air Corps.
They trained us at Sweetwater, Texas for 8 months, and I graduated from that in September of 1944. And then I went to operational duty at Eagle Pass, Texas, and I was towing targets in a T6, and that's where we would take off and let out a target behind the plane and fly up and down a certain line, and then the people that were learning how to shoot from other airplanes would fire at our targets, but once in a while they missed. They shot off my target about 3 times, but they didn't get me. I wasn't ever afraid of anything like that happening to me, because most of the time everything that almost anybody did in the service was involved some kind of risk. And if somebody said, "Aren't you scared?" Like when I found out I was assigned to towing targets, somebody said, "That's dangerous." And I said, "You want to live forever?"
Haskell commercial graduate George Underwood served as a B-24 pilot with the 455th Bomb Group in Italy.
Say, all right, we're going to run 600 planes through here today. We want you to go 40 miles northeast or northwest of Munich, Germany, and start your bomb run. We'd have a bomb run there of maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And there's where you were positioning yourself in that bomb run to avoid just what you're saying here. And it seemed like a miracle that we didn't have more planes colliding. And I only saw one in one instance, and somebody had to be shot up, maybe lost an engine or something like that. We would scatter out a little bit. Our formations wouldn't be quite as close, as tight when we were going on that bomb run, And then we'd make the bomb run, and we'd know which way all of us were going to turn, and then we'd get back pretty close together again. We were on a mission. We went up into Hungary and bombed a munitions factory up there. And after that, we were flying formation. That's the only way we bombed was pattern bombing, where we'd have all of the planes in there. We'd have a box of anywhere from 7 to 13. And we'd all attempt to drop our bombs on the head bombardier. He'd say, bombs way, and that would be everybody. And there might be 50 planes. And we would pattern bomb the area, instead of trying to concentrate all hitting the same place. And that way, if it was like Munich, Germany, for example, we'd go after their railroad yards there especially. And we wouldn't just go after one little spot. We'd try to take care of the whole marshalling yard, And we had bad weather up there that particular time. This was in December. And we couldn't fly formation because it was cloudy. And how come we didn't hear of any of them running into each other, but we were all alone then. We might have had 100 planes nearby, but here they are taken out on their own, and couldn't see far enough that you could protect yourself if you saw them. You'd be too close to them. So I had an engine go out on us and couldn't get the propeller to stop. It was just like a windmill going out there, which created more of a problem for us, took more gas. And I didn't know where we were. We couldn't get a good location by calling Mayday, which we would, they would take a reading and they could tell you about where you were. Well, altimeters also get kind of out of focus after you've been up 8 or 10 hours. They're supposed to set them, like every hour anyhow if you could. Well, we couldn't do that, so you couldn't depend on it to tell you how high you were. And we were ready to give up. We were just about out of gas, and I didn't know where we were, and I didn't know what to do. What do? Tell the fellas to jump when you don't know where you are or how far off the ground you are? Chutes might not have had time to open, So here you are. And the co-pilot started to get out of his seat, said, I'm getting out of this place. And I kind of full rank on him, told him to get back in his seat, and I was in charge. The only time I ever did that. And then what did I do after? Maybe he had the best idea, but I was saying no. And I looked out, just one of the most unlikely things that you think of, looking out that thing, and I thought I saw breakers coming up on the shore. And sure enough, that's what it was. It was on the edge of the Adriatic there, about 100 miles south of Venice. And I saw that. Well, I didn't waste any time getting down there. And we landed again with our gear up, and just scooted along this beach. Nobody heard, so that was the big thing.
Haskell graduate Ben Shoemake served in the U.S. infantry when they invaded Italy.
I went to Italy and then made an invasion of southern France. We were at Anzio, and that was a landing they made up the coast from Italy. So they were getting ready to go north to Rome, and which they did. And then we went as far as Rome, and then they came back. But they had some other divisions coming in. They went all north. We went to southern France. When we left Haskell, we were all like family. We were all just like brothers. And I don't know of one that ever got homesick. And like when I went overseas, I was used to being away from home because more or less had to be. But I know the people that they were all from the South, and I was from Alabama and Georgia, and they kind of got homesick, and they didn't know too much about the military. Like Philip was talking about, some of those guys they couldn't do about face or nothing else. So had to show a few things like that.
There, the boys were, the majority of the boys, left for service. So they put the girls doing their jobs. Some of the girls took printing, some took carpentry, some took welding, some took painting, whatever, where they needed to put us. So I took welding, and I was in carpentry. I had Mr. Hansberry. Mr. Hansberry taught me how to make a chest of drawers. And of course we had gardening. We worked at Victory Gardens.
We were already there in the Philippines when we got on the radio. Pearl Harbor was under attack. Well, immediately had already been out in the field and knowing where our gun positions were going to be. So we said, take to the field. So we took her and went on out there, and we was already set up. And I guess about 11:30 is when they came over and got to the Philippines there.
Alex Matthews was already serving in the U.S. Army in the Philippines when the war broke out. What he didn't know was that his Haskell classmate, Philip Kuhn, was also serving there with another unit. Their paths would soon cross as they became part of the nightmare called the Bataan Death March.
They hit us at bomb Pearl Harbor, the 8th. We got the word next day. They hit us next day about 10 o'clock. I didn't know it happened, but I knew something happened, but I'm kind of getting back a little bit. But I said, I often wonder why to this day, we're about they hit it over there, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, how come we did not get the word in that moment, that where they hit over there? Why didn't we get, communication?
It was because no one knew what was going to happen, until they witnessed it. Some of them say that if you got tired and couldn't go no far and you fell down, you got bayoneted right there, you pulled off the shot. My part there was, apparently it must have been pretty close to the head of this, because most of those that fell back were trying to get to Corregidor, and so they were going clear down to the end of the island. Ours was up a little closer, and I think even there, 60 to 70 miles we had to go clear up to this, I think they call it San Fernando. That when we made the march and got there, then there was a scout camp or training camp for the Filipinos was there, so that's where they set us. And we tried to get water, what we could, these spigots would be open, and sometimes be open. We'd try to get some water in them, and they'd beat the heck out of us. But anyway, at one particular place there, he was in my squad. He was a Spanish guy named Juan Ramirez. I said, Juan, you watch what we've got here. Let me see if I can get some water for you. He said, okay. So I started over and I got some water. I got our canteens with water. And I turned around and I started back, and this little guy walked by me. And he looked like a little Filipino guy. And I said, boy, that poor Filipino's going to get the hell beat. I was thinking that. I hadn't even taken a step, and someone grabbed me right here. I turned around, he's looking, he's smiling, and I couldn't figure out who he was. He said, don't you know me? I said, no. He said, I'm Phil Kuhn. I said, well, I'll be damned. What the hell are you doing? He said, I was in the 31st Infantry.
At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they took us down the road, told us march, and got to Lamar School, where they're all set in different groups, counted off in groups, and they're telling one group come back, the other group go down there and get water. No food, just water. And that's when I went by this guy with that campaign hat on, military type. General Steele used to wear it on his front, kind of pushed back. Like, he had on anyone. I knew that face, but I just couldn't place the name. I looked right up at his face, but he didn't look down at me. He was looking way out there. I think he looking for somebody too. But anyway, I went by, and after I got my water and came back, it's still standing there, That's when I said a while ago, I thought I was heading loose a while ago when I saw his face, You know, your mind can play tricks on you when you don't have enough water in your body. You begin to get weak and see you have double vision things. I thought that's what I was having, but he was him with that face, you know. When I come back and I stood right in front and looked up, and I said, the boy hit me just right instant. I said, Alexander Matthews. He looked down at me, you know, and he said, Coon, real loud. And he said, what the hell are you doing here, you know?
So we stuck together, and the three of us were, you know, buddy. We made that march clear on up to, got up to this Camp O'Donnell, the first concentration camp.
But I tell you, actual fact, what saved us, me and Alec and his buddy. Of course, Juan died in camp. Juan Hernandez from San Antonio, his friend. I met him. He introduced me to him when I met him at that water hole. He said, I got a friend here you got to meet. His name's Ace Sanchez. His name was Juan Sanchez. I thought Sanchez all the time, but here lately I found out he was Hernandez, Juan Hernandez. But he and I and Alec, we stayed together on that march. We tried to help other Americans along, but they wouldn't like that. After we seen we was helping them along, you know. We come across a Filipino soldier limping on one foot. I got on his armpit, and Alec got on this side and was helping him along. We took him about a good quarter mile down the road there. And the guards seeing what we was doing, they told us, they shook their head, you know, they didn't want us to be doing it. Because he had that fixed bayonet and he was goosebumps with it, you know, told us turn him loose. Show hate to do that, you know. He can't even walk. But that's when they started shooting. Even Americans, you know, couldn't go no more. Just died of thirst, you know, dehydrated.
That's when we made the march and got there. Then there was a scout camp or training camp for the Filipinos was there, so that's where they set us for the first concentration bunch there. And that was the worst ones that could ever happen because they had tried to separate the well from the sick. They had enough barracks there, so when they were sick was over here. There was a little place open there, we had to stay on this side here. And then they had the burial details, what they call burial details. Those guys that had passed away might still be just laying there. It wasn't just 2 or 3, and I mean there were hundreds of them over there that were sick, and they was well, and they was trying to stay well. And it's burial detail, they'd call your name out and said, you have to go on burial detail this morning or today. And so they'd go up there and they would have a litter about long as this rug here with bamboo poles wrapped around it and put the body in, and 2 guys had to take that body to that cemetery. One of the burial detail I got on went over there, and he was a Chicano, he's a Spanish guy. And he was scared. He seen that dead body there. And I said, hurry up, let's get out of there. And the stench, you know, you could smell. I said, hurry up, get that, and let's go. Well, he didn't want to reach down to get it, and so I said, I like this, and I reached down to grab that. This skin just came off of my hand there, and I was just like that. I said, hurry up! I said, damn it! I started getting that, so he finally got the body, and took it on out of there. That was the thing that I always remember. I said, well, you go through a lot of experience, and when you get over there to the burial where they had, it was just probably about the size of this room here, length, about maybe 12 feet wide, maybe about that deep. Dump the bodies and cover them up. That's all it was. There was no, funeral. They said, well, let's have a funeral. Even the chaplain, I don't think, was allowed to go. They just then dump them and turn around and go on back. So there's a lot of them left like that over there in the burial.
Former Haskell student and internationally acclaimed artist Alan Hauser carved a memorial sculpture to honor the 37 Haskell students who gave their lives in World War II. The importance of Haskell's role in early Indian education cannot be overstated. Haskell graduates have had a tremendous positive impact in Indian country and throughout the United States.
I was at the Watkins Community Museum when we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of Haskell, and I saw a group of elders comes from a tribe out of Alaska who, out of recognition and love for Haskell, were here as part of the 100th anniversary. And they were so grateful to Haskell because they had trained their children to become managers and leaders and help to protect the tribe's assets in the face of the Alaskan oil rush. And they were, I mean, for them, Haskell was, take Harvard and Columbia and whatever big name colleges you want to put, that's what Haskell is. And that's, to me, what few people in the Lawrence community understand is the diverse and far-flung aspects of this wonderful institution.
This documentary that you're watching documents the incredible 60-year history, this first 60 years where Indian education went from an institution that was dedicated to the complete erasing of tribal identity, tribal culture and values from the children that were sent to the early boarding schools, to institutions during the 30s that began to embrace and see value in tribal identity and culture. We owe a debt of gratitude to those children for their perseverance. And this first part, this first segment of the Haskell history is dedicated to their memory.